Hi. Mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so like you said, I'm Luke Malloy. I'm a fifth year senior in acoustical engineering within the multidisciplinary engineering program at Purdue, and this is my last semester here. I am hoping to do AV design and acoustical consulting for a consulting firm once I graduate. And so right now I'm just working on getting something lined up officially. Mhm. So, as you know, I was really involved in the marching band, and within the marching band, I was the technology team leader. So, one of the big categories within the technology team was the sound team, the audio team, which we provided and coordinated speaker sound effects and live sound for the marching band shows. So that was definitely something that I used my experience academically with, just because I knew how the systems had to like work together and be plugged in and all that. That's yeah, right. It was definitely an interesting atmosphere because a lot of the people that I was working with had no experience. So it took a lot of explaining concepts and tasks to unexperienced people in a way that they would understand. So it was definitely a very good learning experience. Sure. So this past summer actually, I worked for this place which does video conferencing and like audio solutions. They weren't exactly focused on acoustical engineering, but they had experience and a lot of practice with it. So it was nice to kind of get some real world application practice with that, as well as learn from people with a lot of real world experience. Since most of the things I've been doing in the past were just projects that never turned into anything, so it was cool to see projects actually turn into a real system. Right. Hmm. Hmm. Right. And um, also, the marching band projects were all kind of temporary systems, and the ones I was working with over the summer were permanent. So it was a lot more important to make sure that everything was going to work, because a temporary system you can just fix it and just remember it for next time. But if you're installing something, then you have to go back and troubleshoot it, and it takes a lot of money and time. Um, I think that the club experience was definitely a lot different because, um, at least for me, I was kind of in more of a leadership role. So when I went to work this last summer, I was pretty much just being everybody's assistant and helping them where they needed help, and there was a lot of me learning from them rather than me trying to teach other people. So that was definitely something that was a big change of pace for me. Um, Also, just like the individuality, like the amount of projects that people did individually, where I worked was different than um, the club stuff because the club was all team based, and so where I worked this summer, most of it was one person would take on a project and pretty much do it all themselves. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's definitely a few places I interviewed with are definitely more team based where they all kind of work together. But the place I went was working at had a lot of small system stuff that didn't really require a lot of people on it. So obviously they had to work with the sales team and the install technicians and stuff. But it was a lot of times there was only one engineer on each project. Sure. So I my primary role was doing AutoCAD drawings. So when I first started out, just to learn, I was updating all of the drawings. Um, that they're called as-built drawings. So when the installers put in the system, they mark up the drawing. However, they actually installed it because sometimes there's changes that need to be made. So that was what I started off doing, and then eventually I got into drawing the designs for new projects. So an engineer would come to me with a system they already had, and sometimes they just like hand drew it, and I needed to put it in the computer. Other times they just said, "Here's all the equipment. This is the list the sales team made of what the system's supposed to do. Just like make the drawing." And then other times I would get a bid drawing. So that's where another place has the drawing already made, and we are just like installing it essentially. But we had to create our own drawings because we weren't allowed to use theirs. So there was also some like copying, like interpreting their drawing and putting it into our drawing style. So that was kind of more towards the end. There were a couple big projects of that I was doing. Um, just like yeah. So there was a lot of times where I thought something wasn't going to work, um, or something of that, like something in that line where it's like I'm pretty sure that there's a better way to do it, or it's not going to work. But I wasn't like as experienced as the people that had been working there for years and years and had a lot of experience. So I was sometimes cautious to like be like, do we really need to use this in here, or like shouldn't this be going to this instead? Um, so those were kind of mostly the issues I had, and just like trying to understand all the lingo because everybody has acronyms and short terms for stuff, and it's when they're talking, it can get kind of intimidating. So those were kind of the two big ones for me. Um, kind of. I've only had two internships. One was the one I've been talking about the whole time, and the other was at a place that focused more on home theater. So they're still kind of they were still pretty much acoustical engineering, but they also did a lot of lighting design. So like not like stage lighting, but like room lighting. They would like automate lights and all that. So that was one thing where I could kind of take the audio system knowledge that I had and apply it to lighting. Um, and there were a lot of things that were different about it, but there were also a lot of things that were the same. So like most of the components were you still needed the same components. They just worked slightly differently. So mhm. So both places I worked, I was the only intern. Um, which was kind of nice because then I could get a little bit more one-on-one time with stuff. And actually, the first place I worked, there was only one other engineer, so it was really one-on-one. That's where I learned. That's where I pretty much learned most of what I know about the systems and all that. Um, that was a really good environment because she was really cool, and she actually has been trying to get. She went on to a different company, and she's been trying to get me a job there. Um, so yeah, and then this past summer there were a lot of really cool guys that um, seemed to really like me, just because not a lot of they don't have a lot of experience with younger guys that are this into AV design and acoustics and stuff. They think it's like a dying um, path. So whenever there's a young guy interested, they always get excited. Um, I don't think so. The only thing I would say is that like if this is like a path that you or anyone else you know is interested in, try it and get experience within it. Um, like the different avenues within it, because there's surprisingly there is a fair amount of difference between home theater and like home automation and like corporate, like classrooms and buildings and like stuff like that. So like trying to get experience in both really helped me realize which one I preferred. And also just like because um, you can kind of go the vibration and acoustics route or the sound system design route, um, trying to figure out which one you prefer and get experience with that, because I did both internships on AV design, um, and I never really got experience with like acoustic consulting. So I think if I were to have another one, I would try and do acoustic consulting just so I had kind of one of each to compare. Yeah, no problem. Thank you for listening to me. No problem.